Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are here for the murders of Karlov Manor. I think I got that right. It's got an M in, a K in, and an M in again. I don't know which order. It might be Killings of Markov Manor for all I know. I actually can't even remember. Not gonna lie to you. But today we are here for my top 5 cards that I think are gonna see play in Pauper from Murders of Karlov Manor. So I do have 5 honourable mentions as well. So we are going to see 10 total cards. 10, 10, 10. Anyways, but without further ado, please do not forget to check out Cast and Commons. It is a podcast where myself and Reese talk about Pauper. It is fantastic, if I do say so myself. Also, guys, please do not forget to check out, obviously, the channel and hit that like and subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you do not miss an upload. It is the best way you could support me, and it is completely and utterly free. Finally, don't forget to check out Cards Realms. My set review is out already and is live. I also do write deck guides. I write all sorts of different articles on the state of the format, thoughts on the format, and all of that good stuff. So guys, without further ado, let's dive right in. Here is my 5 honourable mentions. The first one is Rubble Belt Maverick. So the reason this is on honourable mentions, I do think it is a fairly solidish card. It is the Pauper Stitches supplier at home, especially for Pauper Dredge. It is 1 green, mill 2. Especially in the early turns, you get to potentially mill 2 or even keep a card that is actually really good that you'll want to have. So that's pretty good there. And also has a semi-relevant ability. Like, don't get me wrong, you don't really want to be exiling it from the graveyard to put a counter on a creature, but it is an option. With 4 of these in your deck, you can make 1 Satyr Wayfinder A55 and just start dunking in, just get in there. And sometimes that's all you need. Maybe even a giant Stinkweed Imp that just can't be snuff outed and is a 5/6, and it just kills everything that blocks it. So it has some relevant text. And being an early card that you can play to sort of start filling the graveyard is definitely a good option to have in my book. And that is why it's honourable mention number 1. Another one, honourable mention number 2, is another card that is specifically for Dredge again. This card, you can effectively ignore all of this text, to be fair. Let's see if I can edit this real quick. This is basically what you can do to this card. Oh, look at that editing. Look at it go. Oh, that is it. Actually, to be fair, that's actually a lie. The creature part is also relevant. So this is kind of where I'm at with this card. The creature text and the graveyard ability is effectively all I'm interested in here. Because if you imagine Rotten Reunion, the card that does already see play in Pauper Dredge, it is effectively an instant that provides you a creature when you cast it, but it also exiles a card from the graveyard. So this doesn't provide you a creature when you use its 2-mana ability, but it is uncounterable. It is a text, so it's not like you can't counter it in any way, shape, or form. It does not provide you a creature, but it does count towards a creature in your graveyard for Lotless Giant. So you often find Rotten Reunions either really good or irrelevant based on the matchups you have it in. Like, for example, like Jeskai Wildfire or something like that. Sometimes they don't ephemerate loop or whatever, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, this card, I could see seeing some form of play, potentially replacing Rotten Reunion, but I'm not 100% certain. Other than that, the card's pretty dead. Like, it's a 2 colors mana 1/3, which is fine, but it changes your color, so you can change your green sources to your red sources for unearthing your scrapwork mutt and stuff, but ultimately it's not really that good. But it has potential sideboard play for Pauper Dredge specifically. Moving on, for our third honourable mention is Novice Inspector. This card is incredibly strong, obviously. This card is a functional reprint of Thraben Inspector, so it ultimately is just Thraben Inspector, but with different name and different creature type. Because So that means you can run 5 to 8 copies of Thraben Inspector. So ultimately, I do think this card's good, obviously, because Thraben Inspector is great. But I didn't think it was really, look, Thraben Inspector is the best thing ever. This is the best card in the set. So that's kind of why I think this card is good and may see play. But effectively, I don't know if it will see, if many decks will want 5 till 8 copies of Thraben Inspector. Because the card's good, but it's not incredibly good that you want 8 of them, I don't think. So you might see a couple of copies of this or Thraben Inspector for 5 to 6, potentially. So that is why I do think it is good, but I don't think we needed another Thraben Inspector. So ultimately why it's in the honourable mentions. Moving on to my next one is Gearbane Orangutan. Again, I don't really think this card's incredibly strong, but effectively I see this as like a red Reclamation Sage, sorry. Obviously, it's a 3-mana 2/2 with Reach, which basically destroys an artifact, which is also a good relevant text at the moment with all the glitters decks and stuff about. But what I do like about this card is the other mode where the destroy an artifact isn't relevant. You can sacrifice an artifact to put 2 counters on it. So if you're a deck like Mardu Synth or Boros Synth or something like that, you can ultimately get a bit more value out your like experimental synthesizers, your Lembas, your Ica Wellsprings by just making a 4/4 reach. And in things like the Mirror, that's actually really, really strong. So that's why it's there. I don't think it's going to be backbreaking. It may see some sideboard play. It might see like the one of like Dawnbringer-y, Cleric-y side. But yeah, ultimately that's it. Pretty interesting card. So this one may come to a surprise to you all, but it is Slime Against Humanity. So this card is a pretty mental, to be fair. It's effectively a Relentless Rats, plus also a Serpentine Curve-esque card. So it obviously encourages you having more copies of this in your deck. I do think, and I do love the fact that people are brewing around this card, which then makes me excited that I do hope it does see some play. Ultimately, I do think it is a meme, but I do also think there is a chance, small chance, that if you play something like Self-Mill, like Dredge does, you can effectively run maybe 4 copies of these in the main deck, and then just literally your sideboard is just, I'm going to run 15 Slime Against Humanities, and it's a great way to have a transitional sideboard against graveyard hit, because it counts exile, so you can just keep milling, and then just go Slime Against Humanity, Slime Against Humanity, Slime Against Humanity, there you go. I have a blah 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 trample. Like, the first one's already a 2/2 on its own if you don't have any, so I don't know, maybe there's a chance, but definitely an interesting one. Doesn't really count as an honorable mention, as the last one here is Pick Your Poison. So this might be some surprise to some people that it's not higher up there. But ultimately, I do think it's a great sideboard card. Obviously, all have very relevant modes, for sure. You know, obviously, Sacrifice an Artifact is great. Sacrifice an Enchantment, also great. And Sacrifice a Creature with Flying, again, another great mode. But ultimately, the reason I think people really like this card is because it says 1 mana, sacrifice an artifact. So if your opponent leads on turn 1 bridge pass, you can basically just wasteland them effectively. And don't get me wrong, that is very, very strong, especially for a deck like Ponza or something. But I also don't think that happens that often, and also isn't as backbreaking for a lot of decks. So if you are against Grixis Affinity, where I think that's probably more likely to happen, I don't think it's as backbreaking, because they can definitely recover. They have a lot more lands. They have a lot more draw in the deck to just kind of overvalue that destroying of a land. And then also, I think decks like Glitters just aren't going to just go turn 1 bridge pass. That doesn't happen very often. They often have Ornithopters, Ginger Brutes, all that sort of stuff, where effectively at that point you are basically you are making them sacrifice their worst artifact. So you're never going to hit what you want. However, I do also think the other 2 modes are a bit more... what's the word to describe? They're a bit more concise. So if someone has an enchantment, if they're Glitters, if they're Boros, if they're Grixis Affinity, you are effectively going to hit that exact enchantment, because they usually only have all that glitters. They usually only have makeshift munitions. They usually only have Journey to Nowhere. So in that sense, it is definitely a good sideboard card. And the same with flying. Less so, I guess, with Affinity nowadays. You could... it was great against, like, Kenku, because most of the time the land was the only thing with flying. So forcing them to sacrifice that is great. But now they've got things like Somber Hoverguard, it's less likely. But again, it is definitely a great consideration. Unfortunately, it is a sorcery as well, which makes me like it even less. But those are my honourable mentions. I do like this card, and I do hope it does see sideboard play, but ultimately I don't think I'm as... this is killing anything as I have seen other people. Moving on to the actual top 5. So in at number 5 is Deduce, which I don't think people are going to really like this card or have looked at this card and thought, you know what, this card's great. But I just can't keep getting this deck idea out my head. And I actually do think there might be something there where is why I'm going out on a limb here. So essentially with Deduce and things like Hard Evidence, you can effectively, you have a lot of instants and sorceries that make artifacts or tokens. So you can eventually pair this up with Deadly Dispute or those Deadly Dispute plunder effects. So that basically, effectively, in my head, how I'm imagining this is you have your Ica Wellsprings or your Lembas or whatever that Gardens normally has to sacrifice Deadly Dispute or Grixis Affinity does. That triggers Murmur Mystic and counts as a spell for Tolarian Terror. So that makes like a blue-black control deck that's been running around with Murmur Mystic, Thorn, and Terror. Seem appealing to have this draw engine where at the moment they just kind of trade on 1-for-1s with like Ponders and Preordains and Brainstorms and all that sort of stuff. Where I think everybody knows that black's the best draw colour at the moment for sure because Deadly Dispute is just broken. And I think feeding into this might help and might become a thing. But I don't know if it will. But I'm going out on a limb, and that's kind of what this is all about. And this is why it's my number 5. So I hope I see it being a thing. And yeah, let's move on. Number 4. So Reasonable Doubt is my number 4. I do think these sort of effects are pretty bad overall. Obviously, you've seen like Spell Stutter and other random counter spells that are just not hard counters. Mana Leak, you know, things like of that nature. Lose Focus is one that kind of flitters in and out of play. But the reason I do like this card is decks like Terror, all variants to be fair, is it mono blue and blue black, all kind of have random assortments of counter spells. They do have Force Spike, they have Spell Pierce, sometimes have Lose Focus. And the reason I like this card is effectively it allows you to play a bit more aggressively like kind of mono blue does, where you play some random dudes, you play your Delvers, you play your Cryptic Servants, you play your Terrors, and you protect it with protection, obviously, your counter spells, your Spell Pierces, all that sort of stuff. So this fits in nicely already. It's a protection spell, but what it also does is it's a protection spell that gives you Guy Menace, or makes something not block. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't really want to give another Terror, it can't block, but it's got Menace. There is that trade-off, but giving something, I will counter your removal spell and this can't block, is pretty interesting. Or this has Menace, so now you can't block it anyways. Yeah. And that's basically it. Is the only deck I really think it'll see playing is some sort of like tempo deck, like the Delver-esque decks and Terror decks. And that's where I'm hoping it'll see play. I don't think it's going to be a 4 of by any stretch. I do think it might just replace those kind of miser copies of random counter spells that they have. So we'll kind of see how that goes. So moving on here to number 3 here, we have Escape Tunnel. So I do think this card's very strong. It is basically Evolving Wilds. So I think any deck that's ran the store-fronted lands, the ones that gain life, any decks that's run Ash Barrens, or any deck that's run Evolving Wilds in the past, probably will consider, especially if you have a creature with power 2 or less in there, just because you might as well. Like, even if you play, in my opinion, even if you're playing blue-black control and they're running a one of Maestro's Theatre, you may as well replace it with an escape tunnel, just because that 1 damage off an augur, making an augur unblockable, may come in handy. And I don't think it's going to be worth the 1 point of life. And also, I do think having the sacrifice being at any point really does improve with Brainstorm, where obviously like Maestro's Theatre doesn't. So that's one iteration where I do think you may as well run this. But also second to that, you've also got decks like Blue-Red or Blue-Black Fate anyways that probably run a couple of copies of either Ash Barons or Maestro's Theatre or whatever, where again I think this card can shine. Helps you get your ninjas through. Obviously I know it's only a 1 hit, but making sure that 1 hit is 1 extra card, 2 extra damage, you know, it might add up, especially over the course of like 50 games. It might actually be game winning. And then my final one, which I also think is the biggest upgrade, is Tireless Tribe. Being able to have your Wedding Invitation or your Shadow Rift be on a land is incredibly strong. It can't be interacted with, and also the deck pretty much already runs like 4 Ash Barons or 4 Evolving Wilds or whatever it is, because it runs like 2 planes. So running multiple of these is just great, and I think it's probably worthwhile. And that's kind of why I just think on a pure play perspective, like this card's not game breaking by any stretch, but it's also a card that just functionally replaces quite a lot of cards, in my opinion. So that is why it is number 3 and probably should be higher. Moving on to number 2 is a card that probably a lot of people have been speaking about, but it was spoiled quite early on. So that is Demand Answers, or Redly Dispute, as I've seen it be called. So this is effectively like a red Deadly Dispute for obviously red decks. As an additional cost, you sacrifice an artifact or discard a card and then draw 2 cards. So I do think this card's strong. Having it basically have the sacrifice and artifact clause to basically Torment and Voice is such not game breaking, but so different to this card. Like opens this card up immensely. So it allows, I don't even know where to start. So it just gives you another Deadly Dispute effect that's in red, so you don't have to be in black. Something like Mono Red Tron would benefit from this. Potentially even other sort of non-black artifact-based decks. Boros Synth, for example, is where it could benefit from they were running maybe Faithless Luton. You can run this instead. My only thing is, downside to this is, I don't think it'll replace every 2 mana draw 2. Like, I don't think your Kuldothers are going to play this over Ren's Resolve. And I don't think like something like Grixis Affinity is going to play this over Reckoner's Bag or even Fanatical Offering. So, but I do think this card is great. I do think it's very strong, and I'm more interested to see where the power level of, obviously, the Pauper Masters make this C play, is where I'm at with this card. But this card is very, very strong, and I look forward to seeing what people do with it. My number 1 pick, but maybe this is probably my bias towards black decks, is Extractor Confession. So this card is effectively a 2 mana Chainer's Edict, or it's the 2 mana Chainer's Edict, to be fair, on the non-collect evidence side. And then if evidence was collected, the opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power. So what that does is that effectively allows them to bypass their hate or way of getting around Chainer's Edict. So you can get around the Cartouche of Solitude or additional 1/1s, or all that Glitters decks can get around like Ornithopter and things like that. You are basically just hitting the thing you want to hit. Or same with Terror, you get around like the Falagi, you get around like the 1/1 Delvers or the Rotten Reunions. Like, this avoids all of that hate. And it's not that big of a cost. Evidence 6 sounds like a lot. So exiling cards with total mana value 6 or greater from your graveyard is a lot of mana value. But even though most decks, so the 2 decks I imagine this seeing playing is Gardens, for first off, and secondly is Blue-Black Terror. So both of those decks, if you flip a Terror, first of all, it's active from your Thought Scours or Mental Notes. If you land cycle a Lorien Revealed and have a Thought Scour or a Ponder or any of your 1 mana removal spells, it's active. if you've cast Snuff Out +2 Thought Scour effects, it's active. Like, there's a lot of different cards that just have total mana value, and that's not even to mention the fact that Gardens also has really good access to it. You've got Spin and Darkness at 6. You've got even Ichor Wellspring or Lembas or whatever. Well, not Lembas. Lembas is a bad example, but Ichor Wellspring and Deadly Dispute is 4 of that. So, like, literally those 2 and 1 other kill spell is active. And also Troll of Khazad-dûm is literally like Swamp Cycle. That is 6 straight off the bat. So you can easily have this active through a Cartouche as early as turn 2. So it's not a good sign for Bocals, really. They've definitely had a bad 2 sets with Tithe Blade plus this. So my only issue with this, it's a sorcery, but Chainer's Edict's a sorcery anyways, and Seasmall playing Diabolic Edict. And this card's pretty good. And yeah, that kind of rounds up my top 5. Please let me know what you guys think your top 5. Obviously, I had like 6 honourable mentions as well, which I'd like to shout out and was great to see. And let me know if you think any of those should have been up, if I've missed anything, all that sort of good stuff. But also, if you want a deeper thought process on any of the cards, please check out my Pauper set review. I'll put it in the description below. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. And if you have enjoyed this video, again, please do not forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. And yeah, you'll never miss an upload. See you guys next time. Peace.